All right, everyone. I have 3:30, so I'll go ahead and get us started. I'd like to thank you all for attending the panel CRIES from Clotilda, Unmasking Generations of Environmental, Political, and Economic Exploitation of Africatown. I will turn it over to our primary presenter here, Erik Goldschmidt, the director of the Albert S. Foley Community Service Center at Spring Hill College here in just a moment. But I'd like to remind you anytime that you're not speaking to please make sure you remain on mute. You are able to ask questions using the Q&A forum on both Whova and here in Zoom. And you'll also have an opportunity at the end to ask live questions. I also would like to remind you that there is a survey on Whova that asks you to rate the session, and we'd like you to do that after you're done. And with that said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Erik.
Great. Welcome, everyone. Logging in from Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama, and we are a Jesuit Catholic liberal arts school on the Gulf Coast. And I that serve as the director of our Albert S. Foley Community Service Center, which is essentially our center for community engagement at the college. And what I want to focus on today is one of our programs called the Fellowship in Civic Leadership. And we are, our fellowship program is part of a statewide program sponsored by the David Matthews Center for Civic Life. It is the David Matthews Center aims to build skills and habits and capacities for civic engagement. And the internship, this JOIP internship, which is the Jean O'Connor Snyder internship, focuses on college students and helping them support research and deliberative practices and asset-based activities to get them involved with community-based projects. So our specific fellowship and civic leadership program is now in its 5th year. Actually, no, it is 4th year. And our learning goals for this program are for our students to understand the complex causes and effects of community poverty. A second outcome is to learn community-defined capacity building solutions. Third, to learn from and alongside community members and civic leaders, recognizing the unique expertise that each brings. And lastly, to form leadership skills and self-efficacy to be personally and professionally engaged in the civic life of their communities. And what the presentation will be today is we'll go through a list of our students that were involved in this and our community partners, and we'll hear about our specific activities that occurred last year in 2019 and 2020. Just a few words before we break there. So each year we recruit a new student cohort. This is an extra curricular activity. It's not credit bearing, but we recruit across campus. So it's an interdisciplinary cohort of students, of undergraduates that have an interest in this activity, maybe personal or professional. Each year we focus on a neighborhood within the city of Mobile, and Africatown is our focus. And we work with strategic partners within that focused neighborhood. And our strategic partners for the Fellowship and Civic Leadership Program this year and last year are the Mobile County Training School Alumni Association and the Yorktown Missionary Baptist Church. To introduce our fellows, we will hear from them in this order on this list, and then a couple that were not able to join us, we have a written reflection to offer them. And I'll ask each of them to introduce themselves. Some of them graduated and what they're up to, what they studied at Spring Hill, as they then will share their experiences of the fellowship. Our next step is I want to introduce and welcome our community partner, Anderson Flen, to talk about the history of Africatown and the current challenges that we are getting involved with. Anderson.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Anderson Flen, and I am a descendant of Africatown. I'm now living in Atlanta, Georgia. Since the pandemic, I have not been to Mobile as often as in the past. But I go down, I typically spend about half of my time in Mobile, Alabama, in Africatown, as president of the Alumni Association and helping to work to galvanize our community. I want to just share break this down to three parts in terms of trying to give you a understanding of Africatown. As some of you may know, there was a ship called the Clotilda. That particular ship landed in Africatown in 1860. It was a ship that landed with 110 enslaved individuals. Those individuals were brought to this country because of a bet of two wealthy businessmen in Mobile, Alabama, who still owns a great deal of property there. And that particular bet was illegal because the abolishment of slavery had taken place in 1807. January 1808, there was the law prohibited individuals from bringing enslaved individuals into this country through the Middle Passage directly from Africa. That group of individuals were children. They were children. I think the oldest on that ship may have been 20 or 24 years old. They were on that ship, and as you know, in terms of slave ships, many times those individuals are stripped of all their clothing and they're naked. That ship arrived around July 9th of 1860. And in Mobile, Alabama, it's extremely hot during the summertime and across that water. The thing about those enslaved individuals, they were not in slavery for long because the slavery ended in 1865. The three things that I wanted to share with you that group of individuals did between 1860 and 1910, they did some remarkable things. The first thing that they did, and they brought a lot of this from Africa. As children, they were taught and educated from Africa. The first thing that they did was that they reached out and embraced their spirituality. They started a church, and that church exists now. It's called Union Baptist Church. Before they started that church, they would walk miles to a church called Stone Street Baptist Church. And that church is about 5 or 6 miles from the Africatown community. And they would walk there every Sunday in order to understand the spirituality in this country. After they started the church, the other thing that they did is that they recognized that they needed to own land because they needed to have a way of controlling their own destiny. And so several of these individuals owned from this ship, they bought land from the individual who enslaved them and brought them here, or they worked in other ways to get land, to be able to control their own destiny. The third thing that they did that was so impressive is they understood that if they were going to have to remain here, they needed to make sure they educated those next generations. So they started a school. So those are three things that they really, really valued was their spirituality. They understood and appreciated the land, and they understood and appreciated education. And so they started the school that still exists now in 1880. Moving forward, in terms of the community, they brought a lot of knowledge to the community in terms of farming, in terms of doing things, in terms of sticking together. The second phase that I want to just talk briefly about, that was the first phase from 1860 to 1910. They were in a survival mode of trying to make things happen and build foundation. From 1910 to 1960, they were in an energetic synergy mode. This is a time in which the school became a part of the public school system. One of the gentlemen who helped to make sure they saved land was a gentleman by the name of Nelson Adams. Nelson Adams was a trustee of the school, and he was actually a member of Yorktown Baptist Church. From 1910 to 1960, the school, the community, and the churches came together to build an incredible community in terms of businesses, in terms of educational people, and so on. And so a couple of things happened during that time. There were two outstanding educators that were brought in to there starting in 1910. One was Isaac J. Whitley, who was a disciple of Booker T. Washington. And Booker T. Washington often visited Africatown before he died in 1915. Another person that was outstanding in terms of the visionary that was a part of that community was a gentleman by the name of Benjamin F. Baker, who was also an educator. Both of those gentlemen helped to really transform Africatown with the descendants of that Clotilda ship to make it a very prosperous and rewarding experience for me growing up. It was also a very protective community. In fact, one of the Black doctors who was at another location had operated or performed a procedure on a white female. That particular doctor was ran out of the community in which he lived. And he came to Africatown because he knew in Africatown, the police or no one else could get in there without the community allowing you to do so. And that was part of the African tradition of that community. I want to just move forward real quickly to talk about from 1960 to now. In 1960, Africatown became incorporated with the city of Mobile. Prior to that time, it basically governed itself. It was unincorporated. The tragedy of that transition was that community was not represented by anyone who had a vested interest in the community, as we had done before. In terms of the city council people, in terms of the county commission, in terms of the school board. Everything that we got from that community starting around 1970 on, the community had to fight for. And when it did get things, those things were not fairly, equitably given to us. The other thing that happened was that community was inundated because it did not have any power, and it had bought into a system in terms of Mobile with governmental officials and others. And because it did not have any powers, industry just tried to run all over the community. And in around late 60s and 70s, there was a gentleman by the name of Henry Williams who fought tooth and nail to try to make sure that community survived. And that was another gentleman who was at Yorktown Baptist Church. So we have these three distinct periods in terms of Africatown. The first, from 1860 to 1910, are very critical years in terms of the enslaved individuals and what they did in order to try to survive and build a foundation. That 1910 to 1960 was when the community thrived and was just synergized. And then around 1970, the community began to deteriorate because they turned their power over to others who did not have the best interests at heart of the community. And so that's the position that we're in today in terms of fighting to try to regain this historical significance. As some of you may know, we are listed on the historical sites in terms of historical places. We're working with the National Park Service and other colleges and universities to try to bring about a resurgence of that great history of Africatown. And I'm glad to be here today, and I'm glad that Spring Hill is working with us in trying to really document the kinds of things that have happened and begin to use this documentation to transform the healing process to revitalize Africatown. Thank you.
Dr. Erik, you're muted.
Thank you, Christian. Anderson, thank you for your words there. We will transition over to Elisabeth Dreaden to talk about the learning experiences of the cohort last year.
Hey guys, so like you said, my name is Elisabeth Dreaden. I am now a former graduate of Spring Hill. I was part of the class of 2020 that did not quite get to graduate like normal. But today I want to briefly share with you our learning experiences and kind of a brief timeline of what we did during our time during the fellowship. And I do want to go ahead and apologize beforehand because as soon as I get done talking, I've got to jump off and get on another call for school. But our 2019-2020 JOIP internship was actually my second JOIP internship during my time at Spring Hill College. I initially did the fellowship, the internship during my sophomore year, and was very eager, I think one of the first to email Dr. Erik again in my senior year, hoping to be a part of this cohort yet again. The student experience with the community of Africatown began with what you see in the pictures on the screen. We were learning about the community with Mr. Anderson Flynn, as well as Joe Womack, and what we were doing was touring the area and meeting key community leaders like these men. We had the opportunity to explore a deep and enthralling history that is right in most of our backyards. On a personal level, many people in my family actually work in the paper mill that was part of the industrialization of the Africatown area. This, it hit close to home for me. This experience forced me to look inward at myself and the people who I hold near and dear to my heart, because we are a part of the industrialization of Africatown. That's part of what my family does. They work in the paper mills. After learning about the rich history and the current state of Africatown, we were trained in the following areas: asset-based community development, community dialogue facilitation, and deliberative dialogue forums. Just very briefly, asset-based community development, or what some people they'll call it ABCD, is a strategy for sustaining community-driven development. It builds on the assets that are within the community and helps individuals, associations, places like the Mobile County Training School for Alumni Association and those like that come together through their assets, not their needs. We were taught how to facilitate and moderate community conversations using ABCD, as well as making the use of deliberative forums. Deliberative forums are participant-focused conversations where the facilitator is the navigator of the conversation. This information was what I had learned in my previous JOIP internship during my sophomore year. But during my senior year, this community of Africatown blessed me with the opportunity to expand on my growing skill set as an engaged and active community member. I was able to explore more in depth the training that comes from the David Matthews Center. And I was also taught how to be an active listener, especially in how that pertains to community conversations. After our training, we began planning our community conversations. They are all tools that I've taken with me into my daily life, my jobs, schooling, my home life. They have all been affected by me being a part of our learning experiences with the fellowship and civic leadership. The fellowship also had the opportunity early in 2020, right before the shutdown, to experience the retreat hosted for all of the JOIP interns for the David Matthews Center. We went to Montgomery and we were able to join forces with students with like minds. We met faculty and students, like Dr. Erik was saying, from a variety of colleges and universities across the state of Alabama, who are all participating in similar community engagement projects. At the retreat, we were encouraged in our roles as fellows and interns in communities. We were given more tools and resources that would aid us as we continue to be active citizens in our communities. After watching the movie Just Mercy, that featured the stories of Brian Stevenson and his beginnings of the Equal Justice Initiative, also known as EJI, we had the opportunity to visit EJI's the National Memorial and the Legacy Museum. Both are in the heart of Montgomery. The Memorial for Peace and Justice, it recognizes the tragic history of lynching in the United States. We also had the opportunity to tour the Frank M. Johnson Courthouse. Judge Frank Johnson was the federal judge who actually ruled against segregation on the city buses, affirming the Montgomery bus boycott. We got to experience a deep history in Montgomery, and that helped us play a role, I think, even better in Africatown. It helped us learn how to listen to more closely to history and what our past has been telling us. Now that I've explained our general timeline with some of the highlights that we did throughout the year pointed out, we're going to continue this presentation with a description of our focus project, which was our community conversations. And with that, I've got to say goodbye, but I'm hoping to rewatch it here soon.
Thank you, Elisabeth, and thanks for fitting us in before your class. Next, we'll hear from Zach Schultz and Hana Blalack about our focused project.
Hello, everybody. I'm Zach Schultz. I was a junior at Spring Hill College when I joined the Africatown Fellowship. However, like many individuals suffering from the COVID-19 pandemic, I made the difficult choice to transfer to Tulane University, which is closer to home. And there I am a senior, set to graduate in 2021, 2022, around that region. But I'll be walking you through our actual community conversation in Africatown. The conversation took place on January 17th, 2020 from 6 to 8 p.m. Pastor Williams and Mr. Flynn had invited 30 guests from the community. We fellows arrived around 5 p.m. to prepare to set up various tables for the actual conversations, as you can see pictured on the PowerPoint presentation. There I am in red, and there's Hana in gray. At each table, there were 2 fellows stationed. One served as the facilitator. That was my role at this particular table. And the other student served as a note taker. At 5:30, the guests began to arrive, and we had fellows stationed at the door to greet them and to direct them to the table, at which myself and I believe Elisabeth were stationed to issue name tags so people could become familiar with one another if they weren't already. Raffles for the raffle, which would take place at the end of the evening, which I'll go into later. And as well as seating assignments, because assignments were either random or predetermined seating. So around 6 o'clock, we, after initial introductions by Pastor Williams and Mr. Flynn, we then went into the dinner component of the evening, and we had barbecue provided for everybody, and the dinners were actually consumed at the tables that we would be discussing thereafter. And I think this was part of a overall goal of being as hospitable as we possibly could, and to foster relationships at our tables prior to actually getting into the dialogue, which in turn created a sort of openness and familiarity at the tables. After dinner, we then had an introduction into the actual setting the stage for the event by Mr. Flynn, Pastor Williams, and Dr. Goldschmidt. And every table then kind of split off into their own individual dialogues. At each table, the facilitator would explain some general ground rules and make sure that everybody consented to them. That would just be to be mindful and respectful as to what the other members at the table were saying, and to try not to talk over, and to be generally open-minded. The facilitator also would explain the role of the note taker, that notes would be taken through this process to collect data and make sure that we were memorializing the event properly. The questions which we addressed were predetermined, and as Elisabeth was discussing earlier, they were asset-based questions meant to highlight the positives about Africatown, and they were as follows. What do you love about Africatown? What are your hopes and dreams for Africatown? And what has gotten in the way of the community? Each question was addressed in turn, and after a period of lengthy discussion, and we would then transition into the next question. But prior to doing so, the note taker at the table, Hana in my instance at table 3, as you can see there, would go over the notes and make sure that everybody at the table agreed that it was an accurate and charitable description, as well as giving them an opportunity to add anything they thought was substantially important prior to transitioning to the next question. That process was repeated for all 3 questions. After this, we then moved on to address the group as a whole and moved on to the raffle portion of the evening. This was a good way, I think, to kind of end on a pretty happy note with just good old joyful excitement about the prospect of winning a few prizes from our bookstore, because the conversations had been very humbling and very intense in a way, and this was just a way to kind of take a step back from that and process and then recoup. And so that was a good note. And then we had discussed an upcoming meeting, which most people seem to be pretty excited about. However, due to the COVID-19 pandemic, that has been postponed. And then Pastor Williams gave his blessing, and we adjourned around 8 p.m.
And I'm going to jump in before Hana talks, and just want to give full credit to the student group. They planned every single detail of the event. That was part of the learning experiences where we really started with a blank slate. And they developed the questions. We looked back at the asset-based literature, looked at the community dialogue facilitation for ground rules, and they really researched it all and walked through it step by step. And this was also then asked for our partners to give input and refine it. And there was a back and forth so that we were all on the same page for this. I just wanted to give full credit to the students. And then we had a lot of fun doing role plays beforehand. So I got to act out and watch them all squirm and try to figure out a way to handle things the best way. So Hana, you're next.
Hi. So like Dr. Erik said, my name is Hana Blalack. I am a class of 2020 graduate, like Christian and Elisabeth. We did not really get a graduation. My bachelor's was in psychology and I had a minor in gender studies. Christian is the one who actually kind of talked me into joining this fellowship. So thank you so much for swindling me in on this experience with you. It was outstanding. So as Zach kind of discussed, the format for our community dialogues, it was going to be a qualitative research design. And from that point, when we got back to campus after our first dialogue, we regrouped a few days later. We decided that the best way to approach this was going to be a thematic analysis of the community dialogue notes. So we all grabbed all of our notepads and we probably sorted through about 20 sheets of paper and we color coded all of our notes on a Google Drive. And we're all on this Google Drive and we're kind of semi-arguing back and forth. No, I think this fits better here. This definitely fits better there. I don't know if this is exactly what we're looking for. Dr. Erik is writing on a whiteboard literally everything that we spit at him. So kudos to Dr. Erik for keeping up with our crazy train of ideas and thoughts. But from our 20 pages of handwritten notes, we pulled together and organized our color-coded comments and summarized those themes into action-oriented statements. And one thing that he always stressed to us was going to be what percentage is our assumption of how they feel versus what percentage is actually the community members' ideas, their thoughts, and their feelings. And he asked this question probably 700 times. But we boiled down to the fact that we were very, very confident in the fact that these were their ideas, these were their thoughts, their feelings, not us putting words in their mouth, which was our ultimate goal there. So about 20 theme ideas we summarized down into 10. And those all kind of grouped into being community-oriented, environmental pollution, history of Africatown and the youth. Generally, for the youth, they wanted to create programs and get the youth more involved within the community. They wanted to teach the youth the history of Africatown, and they wanted the communities around Africatown to know its rich history as well. There are a lot of families within that community who have suffered at the hands of environmental pollution. One thing that they brought up a lot was how so many members of its community have suffered from some form of cancer. And then as far as the community wanting to look forward, what I think Zach and I heard the most was Africatown used to be so self-sustaining. We just want it back to the way that it was. We miss our old Africatown. We miss how everybody knew everyone. And I remember there's a gentleman at our table, he said, when he and his friends got into some trouble when he was a kid, and before he could even make it to his house for his parents to get onto him, several neighbors had already done so. So they really missed that family-centered, family-structured, family-like community. And then of course, our community conversation number 2 was planned for March 13th, which is kind of when the whole world shut down. I know we all went from being on campus and being able to interact on a daily basis. Christian went back to California, Zach went back to New Orleans, and Elisabeth and I were still here in Mobile. So we planned 3 new questions for the event. I have those on another screen. Let me grab those. And our 3 next questions were going to be, how can we revitalize Africatown to be a self-sustaining community? How can we form a unified voice and ensure active government representation that advocates for interests of Africatown? And how can we provide a sound education that shapes our youth to be active members in our community? The goals of these questions were going to be, go back to community dialogue number 2, present our findings and our themes to our community members, and then do another dialogue like we had done the first go around and present 3 new questions, which would leave the position for the community members to have their own way to take action if they chose to, allow us to take action if they saw fit, but it really just left the community in a driver's seat. So another institution or outside organization wasn't coming in, implementing all these programs, and then uprooting and leaving no structure for the community. And just the whole process seemed very disruptive, and that was just not our goal there.
Thank you. We're going to invite our beloved pastor, Chris Williams, and you see our favorite picture of him here holding a Spring Hill College badger. Pastor Chris.
I still have that badge. He sits on my desk. Our close friends. Good afternoon, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me, and it's so good to see all of the young people who put so much excitement into our church and into our community during their stay and work here. But let me share with you some of the perspectives of the community. First off, most of the seniors were very excited about the youth, the younger people, the students coming in, and their excitement about Africatown and how they were reacting to their questions and the answers. And they were just excited about having young people knowledgeable about Africatown and wanting to learn more about Africatown and wanting to hear the story. So they got really involved. They were excited. And then the community as a whole, once they found out that Spring Hill was there and was sharing with our community, then everybody wants to come to the next meeting. But unfortunately, the next meeting didn't materialize because of COVID. But we're still excited in Africatown about Spring Hill and several other colleges. But I think my heart leans a little bit closer towards Spring Hill because I got to know the students there, like Christian and Hana and Elisabeth, and I got to know them and feel their feelings in their heart. I still think about Hannah's mom, so I still remember. But then we talked about the different stories in the community as far as one, the industry, the encroachment of industry onto our community and how devastating it has been because of industry, not only the businesses being there, but the pollution that it produced and the death rate that has increased rapidly during the time that I've been there. And then they were excited also about the story of the Clotilda, because a lot of the information was coming out about the Clotilda, and it seems as the students were more excited about the Clotilda and the descendants that were there and the people that was on the Clotilda. And so we got again excited because the story had begun to become true, and everybody began to realize that the story was not just a myth, but it was the truth. It was a real story, and real people did travel on this Clotilda, was kidnapped and brought to America, and they established a community where they were really self-sustaining, took care of everything about themselves. They did everything for themselves. And the Clotilda story is a very exciting story, but the real story in the Africatown community is the people themselves. Africatown is a very self-sustaining at one point community, and they had love and have love for one another. It is a family-oriented community. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody treats you as though you are a part of their family. Now, don't be mistaken. You have to be approved of to get into this family. You don't just come in and become a part of that family. You have to prove yourself as being worthy of the family. And then I wanted to just, and I don't want to talk long, but the assignment of the stories being told correctly is one of the key aspects of what the community wanted. They don't mind you telling the story, but they want the story told correctly, and they want every aspect of the story told. They don't want you to tell a part of it and leave other parts out. Tell about the Clotilda, but then tell about the community itself, how they struggled, how they suffered, how they came successful. Tell all of the aspects of the story so that everybody will get a true picture of what life was like in Africatown and life is like in Africatown. And I think the students were doing a great job because they were very engaged with the people doing the meeting. And the citizens in Africatown were excited about them being here, and they were excited about what was going on as far as the Africatown community. But one of the most important things that the citizens of Africatown were concerned about and was excited about was that the youth were willing to listen to what they had to say, and they were taking notes. And so the senior citizens were like, well, gee, we could talk to them and we can share with them. And they're taking it down. And I believe that they're going to report it the way it was told. And it won't be just blown out. And that's the thing about Africatown. If you tell the story, tell the complete story, tell the true story, and tell it like it really is. And that's the perspective from the community. We appreciate Spring Hill College. We appreciate you coming. We appreciate you sharing with us, and we appreciate the work that you've done. And I appreciate my little friend, the Badger, because he sits on my desk and he smiles all the time. He's one I can talk to and then never gets upset. Thank y'all. God bless you.
Thank you, Pastor Chris. I'm gonna turn over to Christian Gilbert and to hear just how this experience has impacted him personally and professionally.
Hello, everyone. So I graduated last year, the class of 2020, with my BA in sociology and a minor in psychology. Joining the fellowship was probably one of the greatest things I've done. As soon as I heard about it, I think I actually heard about it through Dr. Erik or one of the other professors in the sociology department, but I was super excited and sort of took a chance and got on board as soon as I could to dive right into sort of what the fellowship was about and what we were going to be doing. So that's a little bit of my background, but I just want to sort of share my perspective on what this has all meant for me, and sort of reflect on the perspectives and sort of stories and experiences that I had with Africatown in 3 areas of my life. First being personally, next being professionally, and then the last sort of what it all means for in terms of being a citizen. So to start personally, this whole experience for me gives me sort of a purpose to wake up every day. We wake up in the morning every day and we open our eyes, and sort of what keeps you motivated and what gets you going in the morning, and what sort of drives you to do what you're doing now and what you will be doing in the future, right? So for me, this has sort of given me a purpose and helped me find out what my passions are, with what I want to do for the future. And for me, my purpose in life is making the world, and even starting small, making the world and communities around me as well as myself, striving to make it a more diverse and inclusive place. Without diversity, these 2 things sort of go hand in hand, right? Without diversity, in communities, things around you, you don't have that inclusion piece. And what inclusion does is ultimately it creates opportunities for ideas and perspectives from everybody, right? You sort of need all of those perspectives and different angles and approaches in thought to really ensure success in thought and action in whatever you're doing, whether it be working for a company, whether it you know, making your community a more diverse and inclusive place, whether it be, you know, making the joining an organization to find out something more about something is really something that's been beneficial to me. I want to move into my next point, which is, you know, becoming aware of what's happening around you, right? Something that's, you know, super meaningful to me that I've gained from this is, you know, realizing what's actually going on around you. You know, sometimes we often get too honed in on our own personal lives and sort of have this selfish mentality, and, you know, even just being, you know, sort of hindsighted with, you know, family and friends, but really think outside of the box a little bit. You know, it's okay to sort of put yourself aside for a second and say, okay, what's going on in my community? What's going on even globally? Because a lot of times we're tuned out from that, and I think it's important that we realize that that's something that needs to be done, and sort of something personal for me that it's sort of opened my eyes to. And really going off that, it's, you know, being a part of something that's larger than yourself, right? Sort of leaning off my last point, being a part of something that's ultimately bigger than yourself, and sort of superseding the selfish mentality that we have. I want to move into what this means for me professionally. This whole experience with the fellowship and Hannah, Zach, Elisabeth, Ollie, who's not here, it sort of helped me find out what I want to do in life for my career, which goes to my purpose. You know, I ultimately want to work in diversity and inclusion for a company. It's sort of an emerging field in the workplace. But for me, that's something that I want to be a part of. You know, I'd hate to wake up every day and dread going to my work, because, you know, it's something that you have to do every day for the rest of your life. So I would hate to sort of not be into what I'm doing. So what I'm going to do is sort of take my passion and that purpose I was talking about with diversity and inclusion, and sort of apply it to my professional life and what I want to do, and sort of the vision for myself, and where I see myself in the next 5 years. Um, Another point I want to touch on for professionally, you know, what this is meant for me is, you know, take a chance with things. Honestly, like, take a chance with anything in life, whether it be, you know, joining an organization that you've never even heard of, you know, going out and doing something. Take a chance, because honestly, that could be the best chance that you've ever taken, right? And sort of relating this back to, you know, the fellowship. I took a chance with Hannah. You know, I sort of talked her into. I was like, let's just do this thing, and take a chance with it. You know, because I feel like we're really gonna like it. And ultimately, you know, taking that chance with Dr. Erik and the fellowship and Hannah and all the people on board really helped me sort of personally, professionally, and as a citizen, and sort of helped me grow into who I am today and who I'm going to continue to be in the future. So take a chance and, you know, have a stab at it. And the last part professionally is really sort of a key skill that I picked up having these community dialogues and, you know, talking and sort of having dinner and sitting down and, you know, enjoying the experience, I guess you could say, was listening. You know, professionally, I feel like listening is probably one of the greatest skills you can have. You know, sometimes we get engaged in a conversation, we want to jump right in right away and sort of give our thought and what our feedback on what we're being told. But really, I think listening is honestly more of an important skill to have professionally, for your career and whatever you're doing. You know, it's something that you can translate to any job or role you can take on. Being able to sit back and sort of listen and sort of take it in and then respond, I feel like professionally helps you leaps and bounds, you know, in terms of whatever you're doing. Lastly, I want to touch on what this has done for me as a citizen and who I am with justice. And that's ultimately, I've realized that, you know, I feel like at least hopefully all of us have a level of commitment to justice and who we are and what we're doing for our community, right? I feel like everybody should have sort of a sense of justice. And for me, as a citizen, you know, I have a commitment to justice, which is why I took this chance, you know, and sort of did this and had these experiences. But, you know, having a commitment to justice means, you know, ultimately saying you're going to do something is one thing, but going out and actually taking steps to do those things to make your community a better place, whether it be going out and, going to your local food drive, whether it be, assembling lunches and handing them out to people who are in need of, sort of those supplies, and sort of going out and really doing those things, ultimately, I feel like helps you become not only a better person, but also a better citizen, and sort of, I feel like you can't really become fully human until you do those types of things. It may sound weird, but I wanna just close this out actually with a quote. It's by Dean Koontz. He is an American author. Some of you may have read his books, maybe not, but I really like this quote, and I think it's a good way to sort of wrap up what this all means to me. And that quote is, "The world howls for social justice, but when it comes to social responsibility, you sometimes can't even hear crickets chirping." So what does that mean, right? Um, the way I interpret that quote and why I like it so much, and I feel like it sort of has meaning, is, the world truly does howl for social justice. You see a lot of people and sort of the media as well, saying, we need to take stride on this issue. We need to do something about it. It's like, okay, well, you know, even people around you, you may hear it. They point out the problem, but you really got to ask yourself, what are you doing, to sort of help, uh, contribute and take steps to creating solutions, and maybe even solving some of these things that are going on, right? So we can howl for social justice, but ultimately, when it comes down to social responsibility, I know for me, I have to sort of unpack this. Is what are ask yourself, what are you doing to sort of contribute to social justice? What's your level of commitment? And really sort of unpack that for yourself. But I just want to thank the fellowship, the whole team, as well as sort of the community of Africatown for allowing me to reflect on all of this and speak about it, and really making me who I am today and who I will continue to be in the future. So thank you all.
Thank you, Christian. And we had two other students who couldn't make it today. Makayla Rodriguez, who's working right now, and Oliver Kane, who's in class at grad school at University of San Diego. But they sent us a paragraph for us to share. And Hana, do you have that for Makayla?
I do. So Makayla was, I believe, a sociology major. She finished up at the same time as me and Christian and Elisabeth did. Also Ollie, she is, like Dr. Erik said, currently working. She was so sad to miss it. She was actually been texting me. She says hello, everybody, and good luck on everything else. Makayla said that the Africatown Fellowship has been the most impactful program that I've joined at Spring Hill College. From leading dialogues to studying the rich history of Africatown, each activity has brought a better understanding of true citizenship for me and the other fellows in the program. Although the citizens face environmental pollution, a lack of education for their youth, a declining population, etc., they continue to actively seek a better unity within their community. Their strength is incredible, and it was an honor to listen to their firsthand experiences. Personally, their love for their hometown inspired me to become more involved in my community back home. My family and I recently hosted a community cleanup, and we taught the youth how to take care of their neighborhood areas. Next year, we plan to develop a textbook scholarship for high school students who want to attend college. All it takes is one determined person to lend a helping hand and to teach others the value and power of community. Thankfully, Dr. Erik has guided us and taught us meaningful lessons that we will use to become justice-oriented citizens of our own current and future communities.
That's awesome. And Oliver Kane, now in San Diego, writes, in the fall of 2019, I joined the Foley Fellowship. Our group's focus was Mobile's Africatown. From September until March, when COVID-19 forced our fellowship work to end, we spent each Friday listening to and learning from Africatown Africatown community members and residents as they introduced us to a fascinating history. I had no previous exposure to the role Africatown or its founders played in the United States and world slave history, and as a history major, I was excited to be exposed to this information. Our group was primarily focused on working with the community on ways we might create a more sustainable, environmental, and economically friendly Africatown for all. My work with the Africatown community was one reason I decided to pursue a master's in education with a focus on history. I was given a small peek into a very specific and fascinating piece of history, which I'm eager to share inside and out of the classroom environment to anyone who will listen. I'm grateful for the time I got to spend with Africatown leaders, including Anderson Flen, Major Joe Womack, and Pastor Chris Williams, all of whom shared time, stories, and community work with us. Their passion and dedication to creating positive change set an example for me, which I hope to emulate going forward. It was truly my privilege to be involved with Africatown and an experience I will never forget. And those student reflections are really reflect the outcomes of the program. And I forgot to mention up front, but the Foley Center, again, that's our Center for Community Engagement, has a stated mission of forming responsible leaders in service who respond to the demands of justice in solidarity with the entire human family. And I think these students in this project really exemplifies that mission. And I'm going to open up, if we can, before we go into what's next and what our next steps are, just want to open up for comments or questions. And we can do that verbally and unless or in the chat.
You do have one question in the chat if you wanted to start off with that one.
Sure thing.
They say, how would you propose making education and engagement like this more the norm than the exception?
How would we propose making education engagement like this more the norm than the exception? The stories that our students, the learning of our students in these reflections are something that we share across campus, and that kind of approach is clearly powerful. These students were not required to come. They gave up their Friday afternoons, and clearly they were intrinsically motivated. And so every Friday afternoon for an entire school year, and yet a year later, they're still talking about the excitement of this time together. That just shows the power of this approach. And I'm actually open to hearing from anyone on this call, any of our guests, to talk about how can we make this more the norm than the exception. And people are welcome to unmute themselves and participate, if that's allowed, Rachel.
For me, having my interest peaked to start. So being interested in the community is what got people like me and Christian and Zach. If you find those students, then that will be the norm. And then more people want to jump in and more people want to be involved. When you have other people who talk about their wonderful experiences, I'm sure that if we were able to go back and, do things a little differently pre-pandemic, Dr. Erik's program would be skyrocketing right now. And I'm sure he's still doing amazing work. So I think that's really where it starts, is just getting people who actually care and giving them the space for them to care and know that it's okay to express themselves and want to learn and want to be involved. And then when they start talking to their friends about it, people become more interested. And then that goes from being the exception to the norm.
Thank you, Hannah. Any other comments on this question?
I think one of the keys to getting this done and making it more of the norm is to having professors like Dr. Erik, who is willing to step out and take a chance and reach out to a community that hasn't been reached out to, and to be acceptive of complaints, criticism, but continue to work hard and struggle to get it done. I think it took a lot of courage for Dr. Goldschmidt to do what he did and to reach out to us. And then he accepted us as who we were and not who he wanted us to be. So I think it depends a lot on the professor and his work and his goals.
This is a comment more. My name is Jessica. I used to work with Erik, and I was very much excited to be a part of the very beginning of this internship a few years ago. So I got to be with the first cohort, and it's life-changing on everyone's experience. The community that we engage with, and the students, and us adults who help facilitate. But my comment is that I can tell how much this department has grown. I can tell how much this group has grown. Your intentions have grown. Your facilitations with communities have grown. And one of the things I think that makes this now a norm for Erik, a norm for the Foley Center, a norm for Spring Hill College, hopefully one day a norm for the County of Mobile, is that it's not a transactional step, it's a relational step. You can tell that he's really building, these students are really building a relationship with this community, and the community is building a relationship with the school. And I think that's the only way for community engagement to become a part of every bit of our world, is to build relationships with each other. And I'm just really, really impressed with what you've all did. I'm really excited to see it. Thank you. Sorry, a little emotional because this is beautiful.
Maybe we can shift into the next question, which is being from Gulf South, New Orleans. I had heard the Clotilda and was fascinated when the ship was discovered. How do you reconcile a local family's involvement in this event? What are next steps? Anderson or Pastor Chris, if you would like to take this piece.
Yeah, I'll take it, Erik. I appreciate it. The next step for us is we're in the process of developing, or have developed, a umbrella organization called the Africatown Heritage Preservation Foundation. And this organization is really set up, and it's being set up really like the community was set up before, whereby everything is brought together. We really need to make sure that all of the families, all of the descendants, all of the community stakeholders are being communicated the same thing and are having an opportunity to participate in this process. I think what Spring Hill has done, and under Dr. Erik leadership, and the Foley Center is not new to those of us who grew up, and I was one of the first people to go to this Outward Bound program in Spring Hill. The Foley Center is a legacy. And I think Erik is and the students are continuing that legacy more than they realize. And so the next step is having colleges and universities and other persons who are wanting to make a difference to be a part of this process so that all are involved. I was just thinking in terms of our Chamber of Commerce's need to hear this kind of presentation, need to be taught how to engage in this process and in this thing. Our policymakers need to hear these kinds of conversations, and they need to hear them from young people. And these young people are the ones who are going to make a difference in the world. And our colleges and universities have to become more advocates around strategic activities like this that make a difference, and need to take these platforms to a variety of settings so they make a difference. And our new foundation will help do that in Africatown.
Thank you, Anderson. And do you want to handle the delicate question of the prominent family in Mobile who was part of the original Clotilda story, and how we navigate that reality among among our local community.
I know Pastor Williams have reached out. I've sort of leaned on him because he's more gentle and kind than I am. And he's reached out to various players who know the individuals pertaining to this here and have not gotten the kind of response. But the good thing, he has a lot more patience than I do. He keeps trying every day, and he sends a message every day about that very, very subject in terms of the to bring those pieces together. And so through faith and through perseverance, we hope to do that hopefully sooner than later.
Family still is a prominent landowner in Africatown, and so they are an active member, but not engaged in this particular process. And so, yes, there's lots of potential for healing and reconciliation ahead of us. I think we are at the end.
And
Rachel,
that's
is that fair to say? Pastor Chris, sorry, you go ahead.
No, go ahead. Well, I was going to say that's the key. Healing is most important, and to come together and talk and discuss and agree to disagree or agree to agree, but you got to come together and work this thing out. And you can't work it out with one party at the table and the other one staying away.
Amen. And we're going to end on that final word. We're out of time, and just so appreciate everybody joining us. And this is a really transformative work for me, for the students, for everybody involved. And we really loved having this reunion with the students and our community partners 1 year ago when we stopped our work together on this project. And so everyone, just blessings on all your work. And it's really important. The world needs you. And it's an honor to be with you and accompany you in this conference. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. The recording will be available later this afternoon for you to go back to in the same link that it was currently in. And do not forget to complete that session rating after attending. Thank you.